Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. Camille, can you imagine? Michael proposed to me about himself. Literally glowed, partly covering the removed from excitement face with his hands. Oh, really? Congratulations. Sincerely, happy for her friend. Camille so quickly decided to do the real thing. You've only been together for 4 months, if I'm not mistaken. 5, corrected Evelyn. 5 months, 22 days, and it's already 12 o'clock. God, this is the happiest day of my life. Evelyn twirled his tiny palm in front of Camille, showing off that, and the beautiful diamond engagement ring. Camille smiled happily and took her friend's hand in her own to take a closer look at the ring. It's beautiful. Camille praised the ring. It must be awfully expensive. Michael, of course it is. He did the right thing. Yes, of course. Evelyn, and easily blown blonde curls. He's a military man after all strictly on the regime, on discipline met with half a year, recognize each other properly, and all can go to the registry office. She laughed lightly to herself, but Camille could still see a characteristic gleam in her eyes. It was evident that her friend was very proud of her fiancé. What I wanted to ask you is this, I went on. You're not going to refuse to be my maid of honor at the wedding. Camille lowered her gaze in embarrassment to Evelyn's with pleasure. Only I'd have to think about it. You know, I don't have much in the way of evening clothes. Where to go here? Just to university, to the library. She just waved her friend aside. She's got a problem. Don't even worry about the dress. I'll order all the certificates. The same, delicate, purple. We're going to hold the ceremony outside anyway. I ordered an arch, you know, like in the movies. It's not all flowers, just 3 colors. White roses and delicate purple. I thought it would be awkward to dress you up in pink, and I'll wear white. So that left only the mauve option. Both girls almost jumped up and down, laughing at the same time. Evelyn and Camille had known each other for a long time. Despite the fact that Evelyn was from a well-to-do family, and Camille, on the contrary, was an orphan raised in an orphanage, the girls quickly found a common language and easily became friends. Their friendship lasted for almost 8 years, and both friends were absolutely sure that nothing could destroy it. Each of them could rely on the other in a difficult moment or right at any time of the day or night, if she urgently needed to talk. Speaking of which, there's nowhere to go in this town. Here you would have already. Finally, a normal guy look and would appear immediately. Where would I go with him? Evelyn winked slyly at her friend, but she only winked angrily. Oh, Evelyn, you know it's not all for me. I've got other priorities in my life right now. I know your priorities, with a slight irony, said the bride. Cramming every day until 300 hours, or hours at this computer to sit for. Hours. Probably all your eyes have already erased. And when will you start living? Camille only grinned, pointing her fine-rimmed glasses at her nose. I live quite well as it is. Modeling is a very promising line of work. I told you I put so much effort to enter the university on a budget. All those courses, private, tutors. You see, I'd like to get some results in life first. To build a career in this field, to feel confident in the future, to provide for my family. Well, that can wait a little while. Evelyn looked at her friend and shook her head negatively. No, you're completely incorrigible. Honey, you're only 22. That's when you should be socializing, hanging out with guys, having affairs. It's part of being a cultured student. There you go. Again. Camille rolled her eyes. Sometimes Evelyn would, in a manner of speaking, overstep her bounds. Wishing my best friend a happy womanhood. Culture comes in many forms, and it certainly doesn't stop at having affairs with guys. But it's okay. I'm not gonna let it go. The bride continued to resent me. You know, you just have to meet someone. At my wedding. Please, please, Camille begged. Yes, 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 yes. And don't you dare contradict me. I'm stomping around, making circles of hearts in the air. Imagine the embarrassment. If it was Jenna and not you who caught the bride's bouquet. And what would be so terrible about that? Camille wondered. Jenna is a good, decent girl and a terrible bore. Evelyn finished for her. I only called her because she asked me to. There's only gonna be 3 of you. You, Jenna, and Wendy from my last job. But I already decided that I'm going to aim the bouquet at you. Camille, smiling, shook her head condescendingly. And it was someone else who assured me that I suffered from fixation complexes. I think that's exactly the opposite. All the facts are there. Evelyn stuck out her tongue, teasing her friend. Don't try to get in the head of a psychologist. I'm getting married this time. I'm allowed to do anything. Who's arguing? Peacefully, Camille raised her hands. Evelyn was a couple of years older than her friend. She had already finished her studies and worked for her father, a businessman, as an in-house psychologist. The pretty blonde made another impatient circle around the room and then solemnly declared it settled. I'd like you to meet Ethan. This is a co-worker of Michael's. They're from the same unit. Ethan will be his witness, and I'll have you. Don't you try not to introduce me. Camille threatened me with her little fist. For some reason, I'm 100% sure you two are gonna like each other. He's a guy, suave and smart. Just your type. All right, Camille's given up. I'll talk to him and maybe even dance a little. But if I don't like him, you're not going to push me, are you? Camille looked at her friend carefully. As much as she didn't like her, she wasn't going to let her set herself up with anyone. Camille wasn't going to. The words of the psychologist were firmly promised by Evelyn. After that, the girls jokingly shook hands and then went to the mall. Evelyn couldn't wait to start choosing a wedding dress now, despite the fact that there was still a whole month before the wedding ceremony. Evelyn's wedding turned out just right. All the guests were dressed in a very stylish, modern way, and the ceremony, held in nature, seemed to Camille much more lively than some pathos, but completely artificial standing. In the registry office, the young people rented for the time of the wedding at the party a few nice cabins from the camping. This way guests could not worry about not being able to get home, in case they drank a little more than they should. Nice music was playing everywhere. Waiters were scurrying around the wide, covered courtyard, serving drinks and snacks, and the dance floor was packed to the brim with dancers. Evelyn and her family made sure everyone invited to the ceremony felt at ease. The bride refused to drop her bouquet for a very long time, constantly hinting to the rest of the witnesses that the moment had not yet arrived. In fact, Evelyn was quietly following Camille, whom 2 hours earlier she had personally introduced to Ethan. Camille didn't mind, and as promised, tried to spend most of her time in the company of her new beau. She was sure the two would be a good match for each other. It was not in vain that she asked her fiancé to tell her in advance everything that he knew. The information that the girl received satisfied her completely, and now she waited carefully for the moment when Ethan and Camille would have a spark. Evelyn had no doubt that it would happen, so she wanted to throw her bouquet in such a way as to let Nadia know that she was on the right track. Meanwhile, Camille and Ethan had a really nice talk. It turned out that the young people had very similar views on life. As Evelyn had said, her fiancé's friend turned out to be a very polite and well-read fellow. They had much to discuss. Besides, the clump was a very attractive young man, tall, almost a head taller than Camille. Silk auburn in places, new hair and strong muscles. Ethan inspired reliability, but he did not behave like some brutal macho. Quite the opposite. He was so real, simple, and yet trustworthy. In short, the girl liked him very much, and so did Ethan. The latter saw in Camille not only a non-standard appearance and peculiar thinking, but also a deep inner tenderness and kindness. By the end of the wedding party, it seemed to both of them that they had already known each other for a long time, as if they had been friends for many years. I went to the army at first just like that, told her to herself. Clumps. Well, because, I felt that learning to defend my native land is my duty, a man's duty. During the service, I realized how much guys who try to get out of the army lose. Yes, the army is not a resort. However, there is something much more in it than just to reach the demobilization. Anyway, I finished my basic service and then stayed for a contract. Bold decision, Camille responded, who listened attentively to the young man. Not everyone would dare to do such a thing. I don't know, Ethan shrugged. I've lived with my grandmother all my life. We have an aging house on the outskirts of town. I still wonder how it didn't collapse the time I've been in the hot spots. Ethan grinned sadly. My grandmother was a terrific woman, dedicated her whole life, you might say. Naturally, I couldn't let her spend her old age in such terrible conditions. So I stayed for one contract and then another. We needed money to fix our homes. And building materials aren't cheap these days, so I figured it was better to fight in a foreign country for a couple years. But then I could solve our burning housing problem. Then, after the service with the work should be determined, what on the civilian? I will become a security guard or maybe in private investigations. I don't know yet. And then it is possible to think about a family. Camille looked at the guy with undisguised approval. I think so too. I mean, you have to get on your feet. First, build a career. And only then start looking for a husband. Michael's a very lucky guy. I rarely see anyone who loves their girlfriend so much that they're willing to spend their whole life dusting her off. And your friend seems to be doing just that. Ethan smiled understandingly, looking at his friends dancing the wedding waltz. Michael talked about her all the time. While we were in the unit together, she was a good girl, a little emotional, of course, but a good girl. That's what he needs. She'll balance him out. Then Ethan turned his gaze back to Camille. It's interesting that you're so sensible about your career at your age, isn't it? Usually all girls at this age are just dreaming of a magic wedding. Well, here's Camille holding a glass of champagne to her lips. Apparently, I'm not all there. The girl apologized to the young man and headed to the other end of the courtyard. There the bride was just about to throw the bouquet. Evelyn hinted to her friend by means of eloquent looks and signs that it was time for her to come and participate in the main event of the party. All the bridesmaids gathered in a tight circle and prepared to catch a neat, lush bouquet of white roses, decorated with silver ribbons. Well, are the girls ready to flutter? Asked Evelyn to her witnesses. Those shouted with glee. Yes, of course, and began to actively at the top on the spot waiting for the prey. Okay, what did you say? Catch. She shouted cheerfully and turned her back to the girls. With all her might swung and tossed her bouquet into the air. It froze in the air for a moment, before describing a smooth arc and landed behind all the bridesmaids' witnesses, sharply turned around, and with them, and after which they all froze with an expression of complete incomprehension on their beautiful faces. All because the bouquet was not caught by any of them tall, muscular guy with new hair. Oh, Evelyn exclaimed involuntarily. I'm sorry, as a friend. It seems we've had a little misunderstanding. I'm about to throw a bouquet. No, you don't have to, Ethan said with a smile, and handed the caught flowers to Camille. "I think the bouquet has found its new mistress. I just happened to pick it up." The girls, close to the bride, immediately murmured. Soon there were cautious female chuckles. "Well then, we're looking forward to your wedding now. Don't forget to invite everyone who participated in the bouquet hunt with you." Evelyn laughed and headed back to her fiancé. A beautiful lyrical tune was playing on the dance floor. "Let me ask you to dance," Ethan said, a little embarrassed. Only now the young man noticed that he was still clutching the bouquet, but now his palms were on top of Camille's hands. The girl looked at him mesmerized, unable to resist, seized by her moment. Yes, yes, of course. It was all she could utter. Ethan gently led Camille to the dance floor, where they began to sway to the beat of a slow, slightly hypothetical tune. "You know, I have to admit, I've never met a girl who was even remotely as argumentative and principled as you are." Camille was embarrassed and moaned softly. "Oh, come on. It's nothing like that here. I would really like to realize myself as a professional first. But that doesn't mean I'm alien to thoughts about feelings and love." For example, Camille felt herself blushing to the roots of her hair. Exactly fresh, boiled beets. She didn't know where to put her hands, which were now resting on her partner's shoulders. Camille looked at her seriously. "Would you like to meet me again somewhere more human? Maybe we could go to a cafe or a movie afterwards," she answered, without hesitation. Indeed, this was the one special occasion when Camille seriously wanted to get to know a guy. So, respectful of her and her outlook on life. "But let's make a deal. Right off the bat," she warned. "If I go on a date with you, it does not mean that you can immediately claim something more. Let's stay on the nerd level for now." Instead of answering, Ethan gave the girl a little twirl in the dance. "I promise we'll just be friends, at least until you decide for yourself. What's the next step?" A short while later, Camille caught Evelyn's eye. The bride literally dragged her best friend away from prying eyes, hiding with her in one of the rooms of her and Michael's wedding house. "So what's going on with you and Ethan? Tell me." "Camille." Evelyn wheeled Evelyn around impatiently. "He's really handsome. And I told you he'd make it work." She. Camille tried to calm her friend's inordinate curiosity. It was too early to talk about anything. The girl told the bride about her and Ethan's arrangement. Then Evelyn looked at Camille perplexed. "No, you guys are really weird. I've seen the sparks flying between you two. Why hold yourselves back in some silly confines? I want to know the person with whom I might have a real relationship in the future," Camille explained, businesslike. Evelyn only grinned and the movie into her friend with a head-to-toe stare. "Come on, lovebirds. Conspirators," in that tone of voice, she whispered. "Let's see how long you two can keep it up like this. Like little children. At 3 you're up to your necks in each other. And they want to hold out for a period of time." Michael, who was passing by, noticed the girls through the open door of the room. "Why are you sitting here? Evelyn, let's go there now. Your fat father will start talking himself. You know, it's a long time." Evelyn theatrically rolled her eyes and clicked her tongue. "Yeah, I'm coming. Can't you see? We're having a secret tea. By the way, how much time will you give before you're bolder in our money-making an offer? Evelyn, come on." Camille's body was indignant, but her friend was unstoppable. Michael looked first at the bride in surprise, then turned an understanding gaze to Camille. A second later, a satisfied smile spread across the groom's face. "But thank God, I was beginning to worry that Ethan was a grandmother. I decided to stay. My young wife was right." Camille came up to them. The young military man adjusted the cufflinks on his tuxedo and then looked thoughtfully up at the ceiling. "But Ethan is a serious man. If he's in love, he's in it for the long haul." Camille if things really work out with him, I'll be very happy for you, I promise. From the bottom of my heart, he wished her luck in her romantic endeavors. Don't listen to Evelyn. When she gets emotional, she can say things like, "Oh, you know all about me, Michael," the bride said, half offended, half jokingly. "And how I am now not any stranger but your husband," proudly replied Michael. A husband should know everything about his wife, sometimes even what she doesn't know about herself. The company laughed, and then all hurried to the dining room, where the guests were about to toast the health of the young couple. Camille and Ethan spent the next 2 weeks walking in the park. They spent endless amounts of time talking. They were interested in learning literally everything about each other. Whose favorite color, favorite book and movie, which one listens to what kind of music. With every minute, Camille realized more and more that she was falling in love with Ethan, with pure and selfless love. That being said, the guy really kept his promise. Nothing more serious than a tender kiss between them never happened. The couple went together to the small town theater and the most popular cafes, which served very tasty funny cakes with beaten cream. It seemed to Camille that an amazing couple had come into her life. Never had a girl felt every moment of her life so complete or felt so happy. However, there was also something that darkened Nadia's mood, the more so the faster. This terrible moment for her was approaching. There was only a week left before Ethan would have to go back to the unit, and he would have to serve another year before his current contract would finally expire, and he could return to a peaceful life with her. The realization of this was literally poisoning the last days he and Ethan had spent together. But the young people tried to brace themselves anyway, even though towards the end Camille found it increasingly difficult to contain her true feelings. "Guest, I get so scared sometimes," Camille confessed to him in a heartfelt gesture. "I'm afraid you might not come back from there. I had a bad dream the other day, as if I were standing in the middle of the forest and I was calling your name. I know in my heart that you're close by, but I can't see your face. I can't see anything at all, just fog, shining and sticky. And the more I call out to you, the thicker and thicker the fog gets." Ethan pulled the girl against him and lightly kissed her on her club-smelling night shampoo hair. "Silly me, what are you doing? I promised you I'd come back, so I will. And a dream is just a bad dream, a nightmare. I'm nothing more." Camille hugged the boy as hard as she could, as if she were afraid to let him out of her arms even for a moment. "Promise me that you'll be careful, very careful, that you won't risk your life. You shouldn't. Remember that I'm here waiting for you, and I love you. I love you, Ethan, very much." Boy and girl shared a long and deep kiss, and then Ethan suddenly proposed. "You know what? Why don't I introduce you to my grandmother? I kept promising. We never got around to going to see her. She makes her own recipe for apricot jam every year. It tastes so good. It's delicious." "Oh, wait." Ethan wondered, "Camille, what if she didn't like it? What would happen to me?" "Calm down. You'll like it," the young man assured her. "My grandmother is very kind. She never judges people for nothing, and never once in her life has she even raised her voice at me. I don't even have to say anything about strangers. She's not a scandalous person." Persuades Camille to go to their house. That same evening, Ethan promised the girl that he would do everything possible to keep himself safe and sound for the coming service. "Know that I'm doing all this just for you. Ask me to do this. Any other girl, I would only pity her. My soul belongs to you now. Remember that. Try to wait for me, whatever happens." Camille promised him that without flinching an eyebrow. Even then, she realized that she would never need anyone but Ethan. "I promise," she said, promising to wait for you as if I were already your wife. Later that day, the guy brought Camille to his house. His house turned out to be really very old and in need of major repairs. Window frames, some were badly rolled, and the front doors boarded up from boards and pieces. The wadding had long since dissolved, so they opened and closed with great difficulty. "But here is my palace," Ethan jokingly remarked, when he noticed with what interest Camille was looking at the ancient, carved platbands on the windows. "What a beautiful pattern." The girl exhaled in admiration. "It must be almost 100 years old. I studied them at university. We had a course on the history of architecture," Emily explained. "My grandmother says merchants used to live here, so the timber is of high quality." "It's still there," Ethan nodded. "But that was a long, long time ago, long before we moved here." The boy knocked exactly 3 times, and after a couple of minutes, the door was opened by a nice-looking older woman of about 65. It was then that Camille noted how hard it was for her to push the door open, that she was being cranky again. As if reading her mind, Ethan asked her grandmother, "Oh, you don't say. It should be changed completely. I'm exhausted. I have no more time to suffer with this infernal mechanism." The woman shook her head worriedly, and only then noticed that her grandson had not come along. "Oh, sorry, girl. I've become completely blind, not immediately in the twilight distinguish." She addressed Camille in a friendly manner. "Ethan, you could have at least warned me that we'd have guests tonight. I'd bake a sweet pie." "No pie, Grandma." The guy calmed the old woman down. "You'd better get us some of your special apricot jam. I promised Camille to give this legendary treat to try." "Meet Camille. This is my grandmother, Vanessa." "Grandma, this is Camille, my girlfriend." With those words, Ethan dashed into the room and disappeared into the bathroom, leaving the 2 women alone. "It's very nice to meet you, Vanessa," Camille said, embarrassed. "Ethan has told me a lot about you. All good things. He worships you." The old woman smiled good-naturedly. "This isn't Russia. Oh, baby, just call me Vanessa. Why do we have to go through all these ceremonies? Ethan, he brought you to our house, so this is serious. Come on, I'll put the kettle on. You can help me get the jam jar out from under the floor." Camille agreed and hurried off to help. After a while, all 3 of them were already drinking fragrant tea with currants and fried slices of bread, obliged by Vanessa's wonderful apricot jam. The treat was indeed a delicacy. Not only did Ethan's grandmother use only fresh fruit, slightly overdone, but the consistency of the jam itself was more like jam, the flavor of which took everyone sitting at the table to a distant childhood. Camille felt like she was back in a school camp in Sochi or Anapa. Vanessa, on the other hand, looked at the way the girl was spreading her product on her 3rd toast in a row. "This is just great." Vanessa couldn't stop admiring the dessert. "Girl, this jam is probably the most delicious thing I've ever tasted in my life." "What nonsense is that?" I waved it off. "My neighbor's ex-Sam. You remember her, Ethan? She made this amazing rose jam. Oh my God, that's a masterpiece. What's mine is just a dalliance." Vanessa pretended to grab from the heart, pretending inexpressible delight at the product of the neighbor. "Nana, why are you being so hard on yourself today?" Ethan winked at her. "Weren't you the one who bragged last month that if you'd still lived here, she'd be covered with envy?" At the mere sight of that jam of yours, grandson and grandmother laughed amicably, taking Camille with them. Vanessa liked Camille very much. She constantly asked the girl, "What kind of profession is this?" "Such modeling and design." "And what exactly will Camille do when she graduates from university?" Camille diligently explained to her the peculiarities of her future specialty, and every word She said made the elderly hostess extremely proud and approving. How interesting it all was. Oh, if I were younger, I would probably be interested in it too. I was very good at drawing when I was a kid, and I always got excellent grades in drafting. I understand that everything is based on math, but only that one also has an artistic flair. Very interesting. Camille, you're very good. By the end of the evening, the women had become so fond of each other that Vanessa began to consider Camille her best friend, while Camille saw in the old lady practically her own grandmother, who, by the way, Camille had never had. As Camille said goodbye, she received a big hug from the woman. Camille, know that you can always come here when you need my help or if you just want to chat. The doors of that house will always be open to you. Thank you, Vanessa, thanked the girl. Believe me, it was very important to hear you say something like that. Oh, children, sighed the grandmother. Why can't I see that you are in love with each other, as marriages are sometimes made in heaven? You are destined to each other by fate. So, cherish what you have. Few people on earth are honored with such a gift. How was it given to you through the walls from above? Granny expressively looked at her grandson, who was actually very happy that the grandmother approved Camille as his bride. Let's not use your high-minded speeches to scare Camille for nothing. The boy knew that his grandmother was a deeply religious person, but he was still a little embarrassed when she began to speak in riddles in the presence of other people. Do I scare her? Grandson asked Vanessa in surprise. On the contrary, I only wish you happiness, because I see that it is coming near you. But happiness is a fragile thing. You should take care of it. I'll take care of it, I promise, Camille said and hugged her mistress once again. After that, Ethan accompanied the girl home and slowly began to prepare for departure. Ethan left and Camille was left alone again, except that the old world was lost to her forever. Although the girl continued to study and in the evening to work as an intern in a design office, Camille was very talented, so she was accepted there immediately. On her soul, she still had cats scratching at her. Her feelings for Ethan were too strong and deep for her to put them on the back burner, even for a while. Camille worried constantly about how he was doing, how his service was going. Every week she waited impatiently for a letter from the boy, hoping he hadn't forgotten her in the meantime and fallen out of love with her. The letters came and went, depending on where Major Finder's unit was stationed. Do you need to calm down? Evelyn tried to talk to her when she came to see her to get the latest news from Commander Prokhorov's wife. Michael, though he had served his time, often went there as a matter of duty, and he had friends there. I can't just settle down. You know, I think about him every day, every night. My heart aches for him every second. You can't torture yourself like this. My friend resented me for it. Camille, you know, the military's life is like that. It consists of short breaks and long business, trips to dangerous places. There's nothing you can do about it. You think I'm not worried about my Michael? I am. Except I knew very well who I was marrying. If I'd been a military wife every time my husband got drafted, what kind of wife would I be? Yes, I understand, but Camille tried to object. Do you need to chill out, girlfriend? Evelyn interrupted her. You haven't even been in a relationship yet. It's all talk and walks. So what if you kissed a couple times? If you want him to take you seriously, then show him that you are. Don't worry about a shadow of your soul for nothing. Be strong, patient, support him when he writes. To you, let the guy know what kind of fiancé he has, smart girl. Adriana thanked her friend and tried to follow her advice, but it wasn't so easy. In order to calm the incessant anxiety, the girl went to Ethan's grandmother. Camille helped her with household chores, went to the pharmacy for food and medicine, and spent long evenings with the woman for endless conversations about her past and Ethan's childhood. Vanessa was always happy to welcome the girl and tried to comfort her as best she could. She didn't often hear from her favorite grandchild either, but nevertheless, she held herself well, setting a good example for Camille. "Don't worry, darling," she reassured the girl. "If something serious had happened, God forbid, I would have been the first to be informed. As long as he doesn't say anything, it means that everything is going on as it should. Ethan, my boy, is strong, tough. He won't let anyone hurt him. You just go on with your life, but live and wait for a day." That's our hard female share in this matter. Camille was somewhat calmed by Vanessa's attitude to the situation, and Evelyn was finally able to find a relative peace of mind. Camille tried to think less about bad things. She waited for Ethan's letters and continued to study and work. Then one day the unexpected happened. Vanessa became very ill. It was in the fall. The first cold weather had just struck, and her grandmother, despite the stove heating in the house and a decent supply of firewood prepared by her grandson for the winter, still managed to catch a cold. Camille decided that as soon as Ethan returned, she would ask him to fix those old doors. The girl suspected that Vanessa had caught a cold because of them, as she had already been thinking about them at night. The old woman called Camille right in the middle of the workday. The girl was in a lecture at the time and could not answer right away. When the class came to an end and Camille called back on the receiver, she heard Vanessa's faint voice. "Camille, honey, is that you?" "Yes, Vanessa. Something's wrong." Camille was worried. "Something's happened, my dear." Camille was holding her breath, fearing to hear tidings about Ethan. But the next second, Grandma said something unhealthy. "Camille, my heart is aching all the time. Headaches all day long. My head is even hotter. Can I ask you to come and sit with me? I'm scared." "Of course, Vanessa will be right away," assured the elderly woman. "Student, but you call the doctor anyway. He will at least examine you while I'm on my way back from school." Sometime later, when the girl finally got there, she saw an ambulance standing next to the house. "What's going on?" Camille exclaimed, bursting into the hallway. "Vanessa, are you here?" "It's okay. It's okay." "No, it's not okay," an unfamiliar male voice answered Nadia's question. A second later, a young doctor appeared from Vanessa's room. He didn't look sad, but clearly discouraged. "Hello," he said. "Hello. You're the girl who's sick. Come in. I am her granddaughter." Without hesitation, Camille blurted out. The doctor shook his head disapprovingly and then said, "Why are you, citizen, granddaughter, so your grandmother is so run down? It's good that she thought of calling us. You couldn't have come earlier yourself. What's wrong with her?" Not wanting to argue, I asked her directly on medical day. "She's got pneumonia. That's what it is." The doctor looked at the girl with obvious reproach. "It would be good for her to go to the hospital with us now. But she's a stubborn girl. What's a wall of concrete? I don't want to go." That's the whole story. Talk to her to talk some sense into her. At that age, it's a lousy thing to mess around with an illness. Have you given her anything? I checked with Camille's doctor. She complained about her heart and said she had a headache all the time. The doctor slipped her a prescription and a list of medications, so we gave her a fever reducer. And for blood pressure, if she refuses to go to hospital, then at least control the intake of all the necessary medications. You'll still have to see your primary care physician in a week. I can hear everything." There was a weak cry from the room of the sick. "Grandmother, I'm not going to your clinic. You can cut me with a knife. I know what you do to people there. The doctor only sighed. You see, there is absolutely no trust in proven medicine. She told me she was going to be treated by their new fence. Camille read the doctor's note carefully. Don't worry, I made sure that Vanessa got better, the girl said, studying the detailed instructions for each medicine. Thank you. No offense to Vanessa. She's probably just irritable from being sick right now. She's actually quite amazing. The doctor chuckled. I'll take his word for it. He explained the treatment to Camille once more and then left. The girl walked cautiously into the room. Why are you doing this? She exhorted her grandmother. Who talks to doctors like that? They came to help you, and you almost throw them out the window. Do you want the right? You can't do that. And then, why didn't you tell me earlier that you've been sick for a long time? Pneumonia doesn't come on overnight. Camille was right. She had never been to Vanessa's house during the last week because she had a very busy period at work and at school. Ethan's grandmother, lying on the bed with her arm tied after the injection, tried to smile, though she managed it with great difficulty. Who would have thought that this damn cold could be so aggravated? I used to tell her I had a snotty nose, or a sore throat, or something else small. But this is how the collection helped me all the time. I was back on my feet in 3 or 4 days, and now I've got such an infestation. So, it's a hoarding, Camille sighed. Well, Vanessa, this time we're going to have to leave it to the professionals. Lung inflammation is a tough thing, and rags alone won't be enough to heal her. Here's what we're gonna do. I'll move in with you for a few days. While you're sick, I'll buy all the medicine, vitamins, and we'll treat you for real. I'm responsible for you. Now, don't forget. The old woman shook his hand with gratitude and sincere warmth. God, it was good that Ethan introduced us to you. Now I'd be lying here with only money and no one to serve a glass of water, let alone bring medicine. That same day, Camille took some things from her apartment, and after buying all the prescription drugs she needed on her way back, she went back to Vanessa's house. Unfortunately, she couldn't get off work, but she only worked at the project office in the evening, so she could leave Vanessa alone for such a short period of time. Studying was much more complicated. The course Camille was taking did not allow her to be late or miss classes for unreasonable reasons. Therefore, the girl had to lie, as if she urgently needed to go to another city, where she had a distant relative who now needed serious care for a previous illness. Canada did not bother to look into the matter and let Camille go for exactly 2 weeks. They already had a lot of applications for academic leave from other students, so against their background, the girl's request did not seem so extraordinary. Camille began to court Vanessa. At first it was not easy, because the grandmother did not immediately agree to take the drugs prescribed by the doctors. It took all her patience and persuasive skills to plant in the woman the idea that pills and syrups are not as dangerous to health as she thinks. In some cases, on the contrary, they can be the only thing that can save a person's life. Vanessa, can I ask you something? She asked Camille one day when Vanessa, who was on the mend by then, carefully moved to the dining room table to pour tea for herself. And Camille, asking about anything, my good one, encouraged her. Grandmother, you and I are like relatives now. As soon as Ethan comes home, we'll be married at once. Camille was embarrassed to hear a woman say that. Ethan hadn't written for a couple of weeks, but she tried not to dwell on it and learned to be strong. You said then that you had raised Ethan to begin with. And what happened to his parents? Pardon the indiscretion. You never spoke of them. Vanessa's hand shook out of the women's and nearly spilled the stuff. Camille rushed to help her along, not herself for her misplaced curiosity. It's okay, it's okay. It's okay, Vanessa reassured her, to the dark liquid spilling across The table. I honestly didn't expect you to ever ask. I thought Ethan was supposed to tell you when the time was right. But I guess I'll have to do it before he does. There's not much of a mystery here. It's just pain, really. The grief of a lonely and abandoned child was silent for a day, waiting for the rest. And Vanessa drew heavy air into her chest and began her sad story. My daughter Emily has grown up to be quite a naughty girl. I sometimes think maybe that's why I always loved Ethan so much, that his mother could not bring me up as a human being. Oh, sad, sighed Emily. Emily never liked to study, and in principle, she did not aspire to anything in life. But she had an obsession. She wanted to get married as soon as possible so that she could do it, and to experience all the pleasures of life. By the pleasures of life, you mean money, Camille clarified. I agree. The woman nodded. Not the damned. All my daughter's brains are behind the mists. Vanessa paused for a moment to wipe a tear of resentment down her cheek. No, I'm not arguing that. Material security in our world plays a very important role. Grandma tried to justify herself, but it is not to the extent that apart from them in the life of a person should not be interested in anything, isn't it? In general, my school never finished. She left after 9th grade. She told me specifically that she didn't want to study. What's yours? I asked her, and she told me money. Mom, money to earn by wit, cunning. That's my thing. I was scared then. I thought she'd go down a crooked path and meet men for money. But God had mercy. At least she didn't kill me to that extent. Adriana listened as if mesmerized. She could not even think that her lover would have such a difficult fate. When she met her Petya, it all became clear to me at once. Vanessa said he'd totally messed with her head by then. Promised her love and $1 billion worth of money. And they ended up running away together. I didn't know what to do with my grief and got all hot and bothered. She was fine. She toured all over the country, all alone together. Camille sang tea, and cautiously, a woman asked, "How did it happen that Ethan ended up with you?" Vanessa looked at Camille with surprisingly sad eyes, as if what had happened to her had happened as recently as a month ago. Yes, that's how it happened. When she and Benjamin married, Emily was already pregnant with Benjamin's child, and she didn't want it. She admitted it to me later, but she had to have the baby. What else could she do? They wouldn't abort. So she gave birth. But they didn't want Ethan for nothing. Not her, not his father. So they lived together for 10 years. Then I find out they want to put their son in an orphanage. What cruel people. Camille couldn't help it. Not cruel, stupid, Vanessa corrected her. They deprived themselves of such happiness. Emily said the boy was a nuisance. She and Benjamin couldn't go about their dark business in front of him. I've suspected for a long time that they were playing games with the law, but I tried not to think about it, because I have one heart, and it's for my own daughter. It's gonna hurt. And here it is. The woman finished the rest of her leftover tea before finishing her story. In general, I then told her to give her son not to the orphanage, and me to bring up. They say, let everything remain as it is. Ethan will live with me, as if he were my guest. And you, parents, go your own way. The main thing is to make it look to the state as if he had a father and mother. And they agreed. I was very worried at the time that this whole story might somehow resurface. But God had mercy. Ethan and I lived like that, soul to soul, until he came of age. All the benefits Benjamin and Emily were entitled to as a young family. Those two took it for themselves without a shred of conscience. I fed and raised Ethan on my pension alone. That's why he doesn't even want to talk about his family. He doesn't even want to know about them. Even after all these years. My God, what a tragic story, Camille exclaimed. Now I could see why Ethan was avoiding the subject every time I asked. When I asked him about it, the girl was seriously upset. The whole story reminded her of her own childhood. She didn't know her parents at all. It could have been for the same reasons that she had been placed in an orphanage. For what reasons? Emily and Benjamin, Ethan's parents, wanted him for themselves, to bore them, to prevent them from living life to the fullest. The girl was brought out of her sad thoughts by Camille herself. Sweetie, don't be upset. Don't scare your grandmother so much. Yes, the past brings us so much pain, but it's the past that's long gone. And what's not done, what's ahead of us, we can build and change ourselves. Ethan never told me anything bad or good about my parents, but in 10 years he must have some memories, so there's still something in his heart about them. Not love, of course, certainly not respect, but there's still something there. Camille's face lit up with a sad smile, and the girl hurried to change the subject, so as not to stir up corrupted memories. The older woman even more so. Soon Vanessa finally recovered, and Camille was able to return to her apartment. However, on her return to the university, the girl was in for an unpleasant surprise. Camille, how could you so brazenly deceive us? All this time, the head of the department and the curator of the entire course, our institution, looked at her with indignation in the dean's office. Let it be known to you, professes quite different moral values and principles of cooperation. You thought we wouldn't recognize that you are an orphan and you can't have relatives by definition. We demand absolute honesty from our students. What have you been doing these past 2 weeks? Did you vacation somewhere with your friends? No, wait a minute. Yes, I didn't tell the whole truth, but I had a good reason. The point was to defend Camille, but no one would listen to her. You realize that with your behavior you frame not only the course supervisor, but also the head teacher, and in general, all the guys. If they see you getting away with this kind of behavior, they will definitely do the same. We can't have students in our class skipping class. Our reputation depends on it. Anyway, Camille, as much as we hate to say it, we are forced to terminate your educational contract. In other words, you're expelled. Camille felt the ground slipping away from under her feet. Expelled. But how can that be? I have all my grades up to date. Excellent and good. I've put so much work into my internship and my thesis. Can't you even let me explain it to you? Alas, we can't risk punishing you more gently. We risk much greater damage later on. Good day to you. Camille was completely devastated. All of her prospects and dreams had literally collapsed overnight. Because of what? Because she decided to help a sick man for once. And if only she could tell him about Ethan and Vanessa. But the provost's office was relentless. Good thing she still had a job. She thought to herself that she'd find some money to live on. But the girl understood perfectly well. Now she would have to look for another job. Without a scholarship to live even in a small regional center is very difficult. Now, when she no longer had insurance in the form of a decent university behind her back, the girl had to look for a more modest job. A person with incomplete higher education was not in a hurry to take a job in a good firm, even as a system administrator. Therefore, Camille could only get a job as a salesman in a computer hardware store. On the other hand, the part-time job allowed the girl to be at her grandmother Ethan's house more often during her shifts at the store and at the farm where Camille worked part-time. They hadn't crossed paths before, so she had at least 3 free days a week. Vanessa had been happy at first that Camille was coming over more often. Later, however, a woman with a wise heart told her that it was not due to positive changes in Nadia's life. However, the girl answered all questions in the same way. Everything is fine. There was just more free time. In the end, the grandmother could not stand it and once literally pushed Camille to the wall when she came to her late at night. Right. After a tiring shift in the store, you should have told me. Everything, Camille. What's really going on with you? I'm old, but I'm still sharp, thank God. You come to me every time, like a bird lunging for the top. It's like all the juices, the last of it's been drained out of you for the day. You used to tell me about your studies all the time. I'd learned something new. Now I can't get a word out of you. Confess. What is it? Camille couldn't hold it in any longer. She gave in and told the old woman about the expulsion and the fact that she had to work twice as much to cover all her expenses. How can this be? Granny was indignant. Have they all gone crazy in that rope? Those bureaucratic devils, they call themselves educators. Camille held herself together, trying not to cry in front of Vanessa. She was still very upset about the situation. Camille, don't do this nonsense and move in with me, at least for a while. Ethan will be back soon. You'll be able to work things out. In the meantime, it'll be easier for you and me to live together. I won't bother you, and you won't bother me either. And my pension will be enough for the two of us. I'll cook again. Good, you'll have enough to eat at home. It's better than a strange diner. Adriana thanked the woman, but refused to quit her second job. On the contrary, despite the fact that the girl accepted Vanessa's offer, she completely took over the purchase of groceries in the house and brought all the necessary medicines. Not only that, Camille personally washed the floors in the rooms and was engaged in cleaning. While the mistress of the house cooked porridge in the kitchen, the girl could not just hang on the neck of a good-natured elderly woman. She wanted to do something useful for her. In personal communication, they still had no problems, and they behaved as if they had been related to each other for a long time. So, imperceptibly for them, a few more months flew by. One day at dawn, Camille was awakened by the light and delicate precision of a rose petal, a kiss on the lips. Camille, my joy, wake up. A familiar voice called out to her. The girl was not fully awake yet, and so she thought she was. Had a wonderful dream. Ethan. Sweetly, she whispered in her sleep. How good is it that I dreamed of you? When are you coming home? So I did. Oh, honey, I'm here. Camille just ran cold water, unable to believe what had happened. Emily opened her eyes fearfully, fearing that Ethan, like her ghostly visions, would melt away in the light of day. Ethan called out to her in surprise and joy. The boy was sitting in front of her on the very edge of her bed. He was smiling, and on the floor, the girl noticed a large gym bag with her belongings. Bored out of her mind. Fun, he asked. Are you back? Joyfully, he squealed for the day, unable to contain his joy. I'm back, I'm back. My God, it's good to be back. Camille threw herself around her fiancé's neck, and he held her close to him. So the girl realized he had never for a single moment forgotten about her, as long as there was a tone, a realization that filled Nadia's soul with warmth and calm. From that moment on, they never again dissociated themselves for a moment. Ethan, on his arrival from the service, immediately and seriously undertook to repair the house. They had enough money for all the necessary building materials. The first thing he did was to change the front doors and put in silent and warm double-glazed windows. He knew from Camille's letters how ill his grandmother had been at the time, and he did not want to let a similar story happen again. Camille left the store and began to help her fiancé with the construction, and it was Ethan who insisted on the first item. You've had enough of standing on your feet from morning till night, he said, by the hair of his beloved, by the ear From now on, you will only do things that give you real joy. It brings me joy to have you home." Laughing through tears of happiness, Camille said, "I don't need more than that. I have been waiting for you for so long that it seems to me that half of my life has been waiting for you." The girl told her fiancé that she had been expelled from the university. However, Ethan suggested not to be upset, but to take some good courses next year. Now there were many different programs available to them, many of which could be studied online. "After the wedding next year, you'll get in," Ethan told her. "We're not in Moscow, of course, but there are so many opportunities on the internet now." Camille calmed down a little. She didn't want to waste the years she'd spent working on her diploma. This would give her a real chance to make up for lost time. The newlyweds decided not to organize a lavish wedding, but simply sign their names modestly. They did not want to scare away their hard-won honor. Only the closest couples attended the ceremony: Evelyn and her husband. "Yes, Vanessa. Too bad you didn't have guests," Evelyn sighed. "I was hoping you'd toss the girls a bouquet, like I did for you once, remember?" "I remember everything," Camille replied happily. "But Ethan and I need money for other things. When we're a little more comfortable with that, then we'll have a party for everyone." Instead of getting married, Ethan spent the remainder of his contract to buy a brand new car. It was, of course, not a foreign car, our Lada, but brand new and ready for all the vicissitudes of family life. "You'll find it," Ethan explained his decision to her. "We're going to have a child together. You might need something at any moment, and I'm at work. What are we gonna do?" "That's where the car comes in handy. But I can't drive." My wife looked at him, confused. "What if I wreck it again?" No, not for me." Ethan only smiled and ran his strong hand through his thick brown hair. "You silly girl. You're going to take my driver's license class. I've already arranged everything this month. It's a good school. They'll teach you all the basics in 6 months. And then I'll take care of you on the road if anything happens." Camille couldn't believe her happiness. Of course she was scared to learn to drive, but the realization that she would be able to drive Vanessa or her future child to the hospital by herself gave her great enthusiasm. 3 years passed. Everything was great. Camille went to driving school and got her license. But more importantly, she was able to finish her much coveted modeling course and was promoted to senior designer at the firm, where she had worked as an intern a long time ago. Ethan wasn't sitting idle either. The young man worked for a private security company and supervised collection crews at various banks. The salary for both of them was quite decent, so neither they nor Vanessa needed anything now. However, there was something that marred the life of the young couple. For all these years, Camille could not get pregnant. The girl was very worried about it and did not give any sign, but it became especially hard for her when Evelyn, her friend, gave birth to a wonderful baby girl. "How cute is she?" Camille sighed admiringly, looking at her friend's adorable daughter. "She looks just like her mom. But the character, thank God. All daddies," Evelyn said with relief. "She's just as calm and doesn't even scream at night." "Ugh." Evelyn tapped the wooden vegetable cutting board 3 times. "I was afraid she'd be as clean as your favorite friend Evelyn." Winked playfully at Camille, and she smiled understandingly. "What about us, Ethan? It's not working out," Camille admitted sadly. "God, I wish I could get pregnant sooner." "Oh, Camille, don't worry." Camille waved at her, trying to put her daughter in the cradle. "You have a yum case. You will succeed, especially you." So, and turned on when he before the wedding served. "Could be stress. How are you slowing down the process?" "Don't worry, Ethan, you'll get there." Camille was grateful for her friend's support. However, she returned home with a heavy heart. In the evening, She asked her husband to take her to the local clinic for a checkup. Ethan didn't mind and promised that he would take all the tests himself if this topic bothered her so much. Unfortunately, after all the tests, the doctors told Camille that she still had fertility problems. Don't worry, Camille, it happens to women sometimes. You're not the only one who's had to deal with this syndrome. Try to calm down, gynecologist. With your diagnosis, the chance of getting pregnant naturally is minimal. However, everything can be solved. How? Barely holding back tears, asked the young woman. Through surgery, simply answered her doctor. This, of course, is not free, but we will do you all in the best way. Trust my vast experience. It is better to solve this problem at once than to comfort yourself a few more years of empty, Camille, so you can lose valuable time. And then it will be really late. To the sobs of fear that came to my throat. And how much will such an operation cost? Ethan asked the doctor, calmly. The amount of money, the couple was bewildered. They, of course, earned well, but not so much that they could afford both the procedure and post-operative care in the medical center. They returned home, both of them depressed. Camille should have crossed the threshold of the house, immediately rushed to her room, and fell on the bed, flooding with bitter tears. The woman simply had no idea where they could get such a large sum of money. Vanessa did not understand anything, and Ethan did not want to answer her questions. Finally, when Camille was able to tell her what had happened, the older woman was a little embarrassed, but she tried to calm Camille down as best she could. Dear, but why go under the knife? You know, I've never told you why I don't like doctors so much. They killed my husband Vovochka on the operating table. He had a simple appendicitis, and some inexperienced kid probably accidentally nicked a major vessel with a scalpel. He was just scrubbing in. They told me it was an accident, handing the scalpel, and his hand shook. Medical malpractice. And then they never admitted what I'd experienced. God only knows. Since then, I've tried to stay out of hospitals myself, and I advise all my friends to refrain from surgery, and if they have such an opportunity. And the fact that you still don't have a baby, it's not a big deal. You're married. It's nothing. You've got everything ahead of you. Camille looked at her grandmother in amazement. She had not expected to hear such a revelation from her. But now she realized why she was so harsh with all her employees. Without saying a word, Camille hugged the old woman tightly. Thank you, Vanessa. I hope there is still some Camille left. At that moment, Ethan entered the room. Camille, Grandma, I've made up my mind. We're gonna have the surgery. I'll get the money. As long as I'm old enough, I'm gonna go on another contract. They're gonna pay us enough to cover everything. I found out. Oh, come on, Ethan shook her head. Camille, don't even think about leaving me alone again. And Vanessa, have you thought about her? We've been through so much while you were away. Don't make us go through all that again. But the man stood his ground. My dears are a year short of 10 for the last and final time. You'll find one. You'll be able to give us a normal baby. Maybe even more than one. Didn't you hear what the doctor told you? What if it was the doctors who got her in over her head to get money from you? Two young fools. You didn't think of that possibility. Vanessa stood up for her daughter-in-law. God can only decide when a husband and wife should have a child. If Camille can't have a baby now, it doesn't mean she's infertile. It doesn't matter what the diagnosis is. God knows how much love you have for her. With that kind of love, babies can't be born. They just can't. So you should wait. That's all. I'm sorry, Granny, but my decision is final, Ethan retorted. We may not have that time. If we make this problem worse now, it's only going to get worse. Camille sobbed again. With her mind, she understood her husband's motives, but with her heart, she couldn't let him go to hell. Again, they had only just gotten their family life back on track. Camille and Vanessa put candles for his health in the local church. Both women prayed for only one thing, that their husband and grandchild would return to them alive. The next 6 months passed for Camille and Vanessa as if in a blur. The women lived. Camille worked, but neither of them felt joy. Camille kept a special calendar in which she used a red marker to cross out the days until her husband's return. Vanessa held on with all her might. Worrying about her grandson was draining. She had a lot of vitality. One gloomy fall day, someone knocked on the door of their house. It was Michael Prokhorov, Evelyn's husband. "Hello, Michael," said Camille, and she felt a darkness in her heart. The woman felt that his visit to her was not a guest visit. "Hello, Camille." He asked her to come in, and after a short nod, he slowly made his way into the living room. "Are there any news on the walls?" Immediately, Vanessa stirred. "Yes, you sit down. I'll pour you a hot borscht." "Agree." "No need." "Vanessa, thank you." A military man stopped her. "Camille, you'd better sit down. You shouldn't be on your feet." Camille felt a little dizzy, but she obeyed Michael's order. "I'm sorry, it's very hard for me to tell you this, but your husband Ethan Boulder died on a mission a few days ago. He's a real hero. He saved 6 men at once." With these words, the man pulled out of his uniform pocket a characteristic double-folded sheet. The funeral flashed through Nadia's mind in horror before she heard a wild moan. It was Vanessa screaming into her pillow. Ethan was buried properly with military honors. During the ceremony, Camille noticed 2 strange people standing a little farther away from the main crowd of mourners. There were many people who had come to see her husband off. Someone pointed to Vanessa at a pair of long, thin figures dressed in all black. They were men and women. The eyes of the latter were hidden behind the panes of large sunglasses. Grandmother glanced in the direction her sister-in-law was pointing, shook her head briefly, and crossed herself 3 times. "What is it?" I didn't understand her gestures. "Camille, that's it. You're in trouble now," Vanessa said quietly, then discreetly spat on the ground. "It's Ethan's parents. They've come to see their son's body, to look at it." Camille looked at Ethan's mother and father with involuntary curiosity. Emily boasted a very slender figure, draped in charcoal black, pull-up white dress and short blue coat, her dark wine-colored. Her hair was pulled back with a tight black ribbon, a high ponytail. On the feet of the mother of her late husband flaunted expensive black battalions made of natural suede. The man standing next to her looked much more modest, but also, as they call it, kept the brand. Looking at him, Camille immediately recognized in whom Ethan had such beautiful hair, dark chestnut, and her frustrated father-in-law's hair was just as thick. Only, it already had quite a few strands of gray in it. Both of Ethan's parents looked as if they had come to see some kind of show in which they had to be the very last ones to participate. Jesters. Emily, as always, with pretensions. Vanessa had a negative opinion of her daughter's mourning outfit. She would have dressed like a normal person for her son's sake, but she didn't. And then Ethan's mother degenerated. Meanwhile, without a word, she approached the coffin, and putting her hand on its closed lid, in which she had been holding the only Alla Rosa, she also silently left. The intriguer, "Pardon God," muttered to himself under his nose to his grandmother, after which he crossed himself several times in a small way. At that very moment, a couple of clumps at the elders slowly and valiantly approached them. Emily took off her glasses, and with a sharp, slightly theatrical movement, she threw her son's wife a contemptuous glance from head to toe. "So this is who my Ethan has taken as his wife. she said in a high, unpleasant voice, either to herself or to her husband. Otribier, however, is the same as the one who raised him. Camille, shocked at such a light greeting, standing there, not knowing what to reply to such a thing. Fortunately, Vanessa did it for her. I see you've lost your way. Why did your soul come to the Serpentine? We have Vanessa's son died, said Benjamin in a quiet voice, and we have the right to see him off. Vanessa needed all her self-control not to spit in his face, right there in the middle of the cemetery. To the last journey, you say, but the older woman replied quickly. Where were you before, when your son and my grandson were defending the motherland under bullets? Where were you when he closed 6 soldiers with him? I wish they hadn't been hit by enemy shells. Vanessa clutched at the lapel of Benjamin's jacket and began to howl in an animalistic manner. In between tried to pull her away from the man and his bitch of a wife. The young woman couldn't believe that her dead husband's parents were in front of her. Finished? Asked Emily. And now I'll say this. You're Camille. Don't even think about getting any benefits. What are we? We're your son's afterlife benefits. You're nothing to him. You're clearly a stranger. I'm his mother. I gave birth to him and raised him for 10 years before I put him in the care of that limited old woman. What's standing next to you right now? Yeah. Vanessa wanted to attack her, but she grabbed her heart. Vanessa, what's wrong with you? Are you sick? Camille picked her up right away. It's nothing. It's a bastard. She'll outlive you. And me. Camille was sung to her in a long voice by Ethan's mother. As for that shack you've been living in, it's always been registered to me. It was my condition when she asked me not to call the child welfare authorities so they could take Ethan to the orphanage. Remember when you were on your knees begging me, Mom? God, you really are a snake. Camille exhaled with excitement. How can you talk about your mother like that? I can. I want to, and I'll keep it short, answered Emily. Anyway, what I wanted to say. Tomorrow, all the papers for the house. And what else do you have in your household that belonged to my son? Send it all to us together with a courier. How can you not be ashamed? Camille stared at them in amazement. She was still supporting Vanessa, who seemed to be speechless. Seeing Camille's daughter's insolence, we could put Vanessa in a nursing home. Benjamin gritted his teeth, or what would be more uncomfortable for her, put her in, say, a private psychiatric hospital for evaluation. Aggression towards your son-in-law is, to put it bluntly, not normal. Take whatever you want. Camille shouted in his heart, we don't want anything from you. Just leave me and my grandmother alone, and let us pack at least for the sake of Ethan's memory. Oh, that's always, please. Her father answered her cheerfully. We're not animals. What a day we give you to pack. But one day, Emily emphasized, so that tomorrow you will not be in this complaint. For a long time I wanted to sell it, only took up unnecessary space. Again a sad memory of her son, the woman said dreamily. And then Camille, for the first time, felt in her heart a fierce hatred towards the mother of her only and eternally beloved man. They packed. Vanessa quickly enough took only the bare necessities, plus clothes. They loaded it all into a nice Lada and drove back to the city, to the tiny apartment Camille had gotten after the orphanage, where she had lived all the time, until she got married with the parents. The woman's spouse did not sue. She sent them all the documents as they demanded. These people were so unpleasant to her that we did not want to once again smear in this mud. Besides, if there is no more in the world her favorite on the wall, then nothing of what Emily took from them she does not need. Once again, Camille and Vanessa are left alone. After the death of her grandson, Vanessa fell into a severe depression. The woman was constantly crying and complaining of pain in her heart. On top of that, her legs suddenly began to fail. You bet, Camille thought to herself. Ethan was like her own son. The old woman needed more and more expensive drugs to keep her in optimal condition, and Camille soon realized that her salary was no longer enough. Oh, Camille, I guess I'll be following my wall. Vanessa Reed, lying on the simple wooden bed that Camille had bought at a furniture sale. I feel like I don't have much time left. I don't miss it. They didn't do it without me. Vanessa, why are you yelling at her, Camille? Are you going to leave me all alone now? It's not time for you to leave yet. You have to fight. I'll get a new job, and I'll buy all the medicines on the list for you right away. Camille thought she could use her and her husband's car, when suddenly her cell phone rang. To the young woman's surprise, it was Emily. Camille, it's Emily, Ethan's mother. You didn't bring all the stuff with the courier. I must have brought it with me by accident. Out of habit. What do you mean? Camille asked her dryly. Oh, don't play dumb with me. I'm talking about the car. You didn't understand about the lotto with the old woman. Then, what are we talking to you and your husband about? Stop bothering us already. Camille couldn't take it anymore. You're not getting the car because it's not yours. Ethan gave it to me as a wedding present, and the paperwork's all in my name. So you have absolutely nothing to do with this thing. And don't call me again. Whoa, the little one sang on the other end. Emily got her piece of the action. But it's okay. I'll have to check the paperwork. Maybe you forged them fraudulently. And I couldn't listen to any more of Camille's nonsense. So I just disconnected the phone. In fact, Ethan that day simply forgot his documents, required for registration of the car. So the consultant at the dealership suggested that Camille take care of the paperwork. Camille had brought everything she needed with her. As luck would have it, that's how the car turned out to be registered to her. Fortunately, after this conversation, her husband's parents did not bother her anymore. A couple weeks later, Camille began to attack. She did it in her spare time, but it was usually in the evening or at night. The woman would let the townspeople down and use the proceeds to buy Vanessa medicine or fruit. Camille was never a greedy man and did not inflate prices, but she was very cautious and did not put anyone in her place. The woman had heard all sorts of creepy stories about nightcab drivers. Once, when Camille was on her way home from a regular evening shift, she saw a monk standing on the side of the road, voting. A tall man in a spacious black cassock with a large gold cross on a chain stood calmly above the half-empty highway, waiting for someone to notice his thumbs up. Camille had never met a man of such a specific profession before, and so she became curious. She stopped and motioned for the priest to sit down. "Get in," she said cheerfully, and reached in the opposite direction of the door to check her own tangled seatbelt. Camille felt the space next to her fill up. The car immediately sagged slightly from the weight of the passenger. "Thank you," Sister said sleepily. And then Camille was definitely hit with a high-voltage discharge. Turning around slowly, Camille saw a face framed by the long chestnuts of their hair for a second, and then she screamed and passed out. Sitting next to her was none other than Ethan, her dead husband. Camille woke up in the hospital. She did not immediately remember what had happened to her. The last thing that stabbed into her memory from the scared cave was the face of the lone priest from the road, who reminded her terribly of her own deceased spouse. As she rose in bed, the woman shuddered. Next to her bed sat in a chair the very same monk. The man looked at Camille silently, but in his gaze she read a kind of realization and understanding of why Camille was so frightened of him. His long hair still lay in beautiful waves across his broad shoulders, but his face was literally made of bath strips. It was as if the priest was fighting an army of vicious demons, tormenting him with their long claws. Emily. Couldn't be wrong. Ethan called out to Emily in a weak voice, almost a whisper, and then a little louder, "Ethan." "Camille," the monk exclaimed, and immediately rushed toward her. It was really him. Ethan embraced and never ceased to press his lips to his wife's face. "For the day, sweetheart, thank God. Lord, I am here. I am near. Never now will I ever leave you ever." Camille had no words to express her state of mind. The young woman could only weep in part and clutch as hard as she could the arms and shoulders of her beloved husband. A little later, when the first and strongest emotions had subsided, Ethan told his wife his story. "We were ambushed. What happened there? You don't want to." "No, my love. I was taken prisoner. A lot of things happened in that captivity that I will pray to God to let me forget all my life. But I managed to escape. With great difficulty I reached the edge of the ravine where the dogs could not pick up my trail. But in the darkness I misjudged my strength and slid down the slope right on the sharp stones. That's partly why my face is like this now." The man was silent for a moment, as if gathering his strength. Camille did not disturb him. She understood. The husband must be allowed to talk. "I remember that I came to my senses in the monastery. Some local monks found me, dragged me to their monastery and released me there. It took me a couple months to get out, that's for sure. But my memory got really bad. I didn't remember anything that happened to me before the fall, just some fragments, shards of memories. I lived in that monastery, worked for a year, prayed, tried to remember. I was told that I had always lived there, but I could feel it. It wasn't true. I guess they thought I was a sinner for coming to them in that state, so they didn't disturb my memory. They didn't ask me anything. Then I came to this town. I don't know why. I was just drawn to it. I walked the streets for a week, looking for someone. Turns out I was looking for you, Camille. And then you got in my cab, and I fainted." His wife finished for him. "Ethan, darling, how lucky is it that God brought you here? Otherwise I would never have known you were alive. We buried you, Ethan. We buried you with Vanessa. It was so crowded." The woman cried, and her newfound husband began to comfort her again. A couple days later, Ethan and Camille went back to their house. Vanessa was not immediately told that her grandson was alive. They were afraid that the grandmother might not be able to withstand such strong emotions. Camille and her husband stayed in the hotel all this time, and the grandmother was told that the woman would stay in the hospital for a few more nights. Just in case, Camille told her spouse about the horrible things they had said to her and Grandma Vanessa, his parents, who'd arrived unexpectedly for the funeral, and how they had blackmailed her into giving them the documents for all her benefits and the keys to his home. Ethan was furious. The first thing the man had done since his return and the transfiguration was to cut his hair, leaving only a longer beard to hide the scars. He found out through his military channels the address where his mother and father were staying and went there. Literally kicked in the door. Emily and Benjamin were just making a deal with some plain-looking man to whom they were about to hand a yellow folder with the deeds to the house, his folder. Ethan recognized it and the papers inside. Immediately, "Don't you dare!" he roared and whirled to the table, snatching his papers out of his father's hands. The mother and father saw it like canvas, but they knew the son Ethan, Rabbi, and complaints against the mother. What a miracle! Our son is alive. The woman wanted to rush to his neck, but he sharply pushed her away. Your son is dead. He died when he was 10, and you were going to put him in an orphanage for abandoned children. Ethan managed to kick the parents out and reclaim all the papers and money they had misappropriated. It turned out that they have been engaged in petty theft and fraudulent schemes for a very long time. They are wanted in several major metropolitan areas of the country. "I'm ashamed to be your son," he said in parting, "but out of respect that you and my father gave me life, I won't turn you into the police, though I should. Get out and don't ever set eyes on me again. You won't get a second chance." They didn't have to be told twice. And from that day, Ethan and Camille never heard from those rascals again. When they got back to their house, Vanessa burst into tears. Not long before, Camille, who had prepared her grandmother for her grandson's return, and then Ethan himself had come into the apartment. Vanessa just cried and hugged him, unable to say anything. A couple weeks later, Ethan and Camille were married in church in the presence of all their friends and family. This time, Camille wore a white bordered dress and looked like a princess from a fairy tale. Ethan looked like a stern but still beautiful knight beside her. The scars didn't spoil the man at all, though he had to wear his hair a little longer than usual. 2 months after the wedding, Camille realized she was pregnant. Emily could not call it anything other than a second miracle. A year later, Vera was born, and a year later, Love. Now the whole family was happy. They are gradually restoring their old house. Vanessa doesn't socialize with her granddaughters, and Ethan and Camille enjoy the quiet family happiness, which they both suffered and for which they are now ready to hold on to for the rest of their lives.